Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sita Kedia, physician at Palm Health, and today we are going to dive into how to tap into our peak brain performance. Do you ever wonder how to sharpen your focus, perform optimally at home, at work, in your life, how to cognitively have peak performance? During our discussion today, I will describe some of the key concepts related to peak brain performance. We will work through three concepts that are interrelated. The first being cognitive control. Then we'll transition into top-down and bottom-up attention. And then how we live in a constantly hijacked brain and what can we do to obtain that control again. So before we get started, I want everyone during this talk to grab a piece of paper and write these three items down: text message alerts, phone notifications, and computer alert. If you need to run to a different room, pause the screen and then join us again. So while you're listening today, if any of the following happens, place a little check mark next to the item each time they happen. And yes, I'm asking you to multitask. Don't let anyone know. So let's start with what peak brain performance is. This can be a complicated question. And because our brain allows us to not only think and feel, but also see, hear, move, and even more, our brain gives us the capacity to have a sense of purpose and meaning. So for simplicity's sake, today's talk, when I refer to peak brain performance or performance, I'm really referring to having or obtaining optimal cognitive function. In fact, this is not as simple as anyone may think. When people who are seeking improvement of their brain performance, they may want to focus on one or more than one item, such as improving their memory, their processing speed, or decision making. I hope today to provide some of the salient issues in having peak brain performance, and then as a means to learning how to actually obtain it for oneself. So cognition is not just memory. It allows us to plan and strategize our day, our week, or even our life. It allows us to pick up on social cues and pay attention. Remember what we ate yesterday, where we went on vacation last year, or even what high school you attended. The ability to speak fluently and with meaning is also a function of our cognition, as well as the ability to move our bodies in reaction to our environment or an intended purpose, such as driving a car. So although we can give some specific exercises to help us tune into any one of these particular areas, today we are going to speak about peak brain performance that can affect any of these areas. And we're going to start with what neuroscientists call cognitive control, and then move on to this top-down and bottom-up attention that affects cognitive control, and then thus peak brain performance. So cognitive control, what I mean here is our ability to execute, plan, strategize, or have a desired effect that's required. And this cognitive control requires these three operational facets: working memory, which is holding information for a small moment in time and being able to manipulate it. Goal management, so what is our goal? How to switch from one goal to the next. Making a decision to multitask or switch from one task to another. So is it the math problem we're working on right now? Is it listening to a 60-second video? Or is it answering the phone that's ringing? And then the lastly is attention, which is directing our attention and focus towards something. So any moment in our day during which we are doing something purposeful and sometimes non-purposeful, for that matter, there's an interplay of these items to execute, understand, create, inform, or communicate even. So let's dive into the concept of attention within the cognitive triad, because attention is what commonly breaks down when we're beginning to lose cognitive control. So what's attention? I want you to take a minute silently to yourself and in your mind, or write it out, describe what attention is. It's an easy concept, but it's also hard to explain. The most common word that comes to mind is focus or concentration. It's really pointing our cognitive efforts towards something specific. So let's break this down further and keep working on this definition and understanding of attention. Cognitive neuroscientists and psychologists have described two forms of attention: bottom up and top down. So bottom up was a necessary part of our survival, part of our evolution, where our environment dictated what we paid attention to. It is a strong force within us, even now as humans. This type of attention was really vital to avoid threats, toxins, or even reproduce. It relies on our senses to immediately allow our body to respond to something that is external. It is usually automatic and without much consciousness or the use of our prefrontal cortex. So you can see that the behavior in this example here with any of these threats is to run. Top down is driven by goals. So it's an advanced form of attention because it involves our prefrontal cortex, which you may already know is the most evolved part of our mammalian brain. Our goals dictate what we want to attend to. I want an A for the test tomorrow. I need to focus on studying. I want to plan a birthday party. I want to impress my boss. I want to improve my well-being. These are all goals that we might set out, and that will then change how we attend to things. So if our goals are to be well, live long, or be happy, we may start exercising. We may train for a marathon or start running. The behavior actually may be similar, in this case, running, but the motivation and the result may be different, as well as the way that the goal is expressed and the attention is really different to how we do and behave. So bottom-up attention was a necessary part of our survival evolutionarily. However, it's not necessarily leading to our survival now. For example, we are not using our prefrontal cortex when we're in a restaurant necessarily and eating things that are in front of us. We might be looking at options and doing what is easy or emotionally available to us. Sometimes these decisions at restaurants are automatic. I'm going to a burger joint to meet friends, so I'm automatically going to have a burger and fries and a soda. Our environment is dictating our behavior. On the other hand, if we have top-down attention, our goals are now dictating what we want to attend to. If our goal is different and present in our mind when we walk into that restaurant or party, and we may choose a healthier option, if our goal is to decrease our cholesterol or our risk for heart disease, we may have these goals actually wane over time or be less present in our mind. Let's say that you just went to the doctor yesterday and you were told that you have high cholesterol. Why is it much easier to make that healthier choice today compared to yesterday or even 6 months from now? How strong are your motivations? How accountable are you for these goals? Who's keeping you accountable? Are you keeping yourself accountable? Are there others around you that are going to be monitoring you? And what are the other stressors, distractors, or obstacles that kind of come in your way in these next 6 months that make this goal less apparent? These are the things that are influencing your ability to make decisions that are really goal-oriented. So you can see now how perhaps you're almost always in a state of conflict, at least cognitively speaking, between kind of bottom-up attention and top-down attention. This may be happening on behaviors, but it could just be happening on general day-to-day tasks, hour by hour, or even minute by minute. Now that we have a little bit of an understanding of this bottom-up and top-down attention, and you have a little bit of examples, let's look at how attention can break down and then how it can, change cognitive performance. So we can have day-to-day and moment-to-moment distractions. This is really a bottom-up issue. So distractions are generally irrelevant, things that we will ignore, and we do our best to ignore them. And they can be either internal or external, and they are generally fully conscious and many times can be subconscious. This is a bottom-up issue when we have distractions. So let's compare that to a top-down issue of multitasking. So when you make an active decision or choice to engage in more than one item, even for a short period of time, this is multitasking. And multitasking is a top-down issue. We used to think that this is something that would actually lead to productivity, but I would pose that it actually causes decrease in productivity. So let's put this into context and show how it changes. We're going to walk through a scenario, and the overarching goal, remember, cognitive control triad, we have goals, working memory, and attention. So our overarching goal is to get a promotion, to have the highest sales for the company that you work for. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting, listening to the head of the company present the strategy for your company for the next quarter. You're taking notes, you're staying very attentive to the presentation. She's presenting in front of a set of windows. The clouds come in, the rain starts to fall, and then the clouds disappear and the sun starts to shine. This all happens within a 60-minute period. During this hour, you may have also noted that the phone in your pocket gently vibrated, indicating that you have a text. You also notice that your neighbor sneezes. The person across from you at the board meeting is eating. What happens when all these distractions that occur over the hour? The connectivity that you had for listening to the presentation just got a bit weaker. They stayed connected just for brief moments in time. They just lose a bit of fidelity, but just for a split second, because you take notice and then you go back to the presentation. So imagine that these connections in the brain for these small split seconds are just a little less bright, a weaker, one could say, but connected nonetheless. So now let's compare that with multitasking. So you can imagine that when you are in the same presentation, but your overarching goal is to have a healthy family. So now, when you see the rain pour, you wonder if your son has a rain jacket. And in fact, you reach into your pocket and you check that text to see if it's from your son. And it is. So you tell him you're going to be there in about 15, 20 minutes, and that you'll send him a little emoji so that he's not so worried. Congratulations, you've multitasked. Are you successful? Did you actually hear what your boss said about a minute ago? What are the objectives that were laid out just 60 seconds ago for the financial quarter? When you multitask, you actually break down the connection that was formed to listen to the presentation, and you build a completely new one. When you look at your phone, you come up with a solution for your son, and you send off that text. So you're actually not multitasking. You're completely switching gears to attend to the new information that you received via text. And that mental capacity to determine what to do and say so that he's not worried. So when you switch back, you have to reform the connections to listen to your boss and the presentation and to try to fill in some of the gaps that you missed. You might infer some of the things that he or she said, and you've actually not truly multitask and you weren't fully present, and you may have missed some key information that would have helped you meet your sales goal. So perhaps during this example, the multitasking only happened once, but in another real life example, you get notified maybe 8 to 10 times an hour via texts and emails. So if you're working on a project, you can imagine all those notifications that are constantly happening in the background that you decide to open your email for a second, respond to that colleague or coworker, and send that text off. That you're switching back and forth in these connections in your brain. You're not really just dampening, and you're actually building new connections to answer that text, to answer that email. So think about that every time you try to multitask, every time you switch gears from one task to the next. So let's watch this interesting video, which is a classic exercise on attention.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris.
So this is a classic exercise done by neuroscientists. About 50% of people don't see the gorilla. And there are other subtle items that may or may have not stuck out. You know, did you see the letters written on the wall? What were the letters? They were 2 S's. How many girls, how many boys, how many people were wearing jeans? What were you able to focus on and pick out, and what were you not? What were you able to send your attention to, and what were you not? So when we have been asked to stay focused and attentive to a task, we're actually having parts of our brain that are actively ignoring extraneous information. We ignore everything in the periphery so that our brain is actively suppressing irrelevant information. So I'm trying to illustrate that ignoring is an actual active process in our brain. And what is interesting is that as we age, our ability to focus actually doesn't change. Our ability to attend to a task. However, our ability to suppress extraneous information gets weaker. So you may be distracted more easily and lose focus. A 60-year-old may have more difficulties with those distractions than an 18-year-old. But I would argue that the sheer quantity of distractions are actually too numerous sometimes in the 18-year-old's life than maybe in a 60-year-old life. And that kind of negates this ability to ignore all these different distractions. So we're going to switch gears from that top down, bottom up attention and this kind of distractions and multitasking. And we're going to switch gears to this basic understanding of how do we globally look at performance, cognitively speaking, and how can it be drained like a battery. So cognitive neuroscientist Carolina Nobert uses this equation: performance equals potential minus interference. Potential is what we've learned over time, the skills that we have, the talents, the expertise, the knowledge, what we do well. Interferences are the things that interfere or block us from living to our fullest potential. These can also be the distractions in everyday lives as well. So if you look at a light bulb being kind of the performance, the energy, the light that it shines, and then the battery being the potential, we can see that over time, our potential may wane over our lifetime, over our day. And that's really the example that I like to give us. So let's take this practical idea of just cognitive performance and let's dive in a little bit. Let's say you're practicing one of Bach's concertos. You're in a peaceful environment of your home without anyone looking onto you. You perform it perfectly. Now you're on stage performing it in front of judges. You're trying to get into a music school. You do well, but do you perform perfectly? This is where your nerves, your fear don't allow you to execute perfectly. What's happening? Your brain is literally being hijacked. Your fear center, your amygdala, your limbic circuit, these are interfering with your overall performance. So this hijacking, if you will, is happening because our limbic system overtakes the signal that's coming from our higher areas of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex. So if you look at this concept a bit further, you evolutionarily have three discrete areas. You have our brainstem, which dictates our basic survival, our heart rate, our breathing, and so on. It's also related to that kind of bottom-up attention we were speaking about because the brainstem is responsible for all of our automatic reflexes and reactions, with a little bit of connection to our emotional center. So our limbic center, which is this green portion, is where our fear and our emotional center is. It also helps connect and link to the prefrontal cortex. And so our prefrontal cortex, our prefrontal lobes, is our rational part of our brain. It's the most evolved part of our brain, and it's really what's involved in our executive state. It's where we set our goals. It's also linked to our top-down attention. So this is what we call the triune of the brain, these three components. So what happens when our limbic center is overactive, our emotional fear, or even happiness, the connections and the cognitive work of our prefrontal cortex is actually literally hijacked. The signals from our prefrontal cortex can't be seen, and only kind of our limbic system is now at work. So evolutionarily, we have three discrete areas. These then really influence our typical day. You've got a great night of sleep, you wake up refreshed, and you're ready to start our day using our prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is like a battery, and it has this charge. You wake up, you exercise for the day, you even work on some emails for about 30 minutes before your children wake up. You're focused. It comes very easily. You make breakfast, your battery charge is still good. Your children come down from school to go to school, and your daughter has a little bit of a meltdown. She doesn't want the cereal that you bought. And you get through that little meltdown, all the while putting lunches together and making sure homework is in the backpacks, and you're putting a grocery list together, you're planning out what groceries you need for the rest of the week. You're able to do this because your prefrontal cortex is working optimally. You're able to plan, organize, execute, even negotiate with your daughter and the different breakfast options that she has. So you get the kids loaded up in the car and they're happy. Someone cuts you off, they almost hit your car, you get a little bit of angry, but you let it go. You're then stuck in traffic. You get to work 15 minutes late after dropping off the kids to school. You walk into a meeting where all your coworkers are there listening, and you walk in 15 minutes late. You have a client that erupts on the phone with you because he didn't get his shipment of supplies. So then you spend an extra hour trying to figure out how those supplies can be delivered. You spend this extra hour, your battery starts to decharge throughout the day, throughout all these little aggressors that happen that tax your mental effort and your mental capacity, your potential. So now, because you've been on the phone with a supplier, you're late to pick up the carpool at school. You have to drop off the kids at their different neighborhoods. You have to go to the grocery store, you get home, and now you're making dinner. Your son now has a meltdown. All the while making dinner, what's your battery charge now? So how is your amygdala doing now? It's an overactive part of your brain that is hijacking your prefrontal cortex. And you have a hard time now putting dinner together, helping your son with homework while he sits at the dining table. Your wife comes home from a business trip. You eat dinner, and on the way to the kitchen, you stub your toe. Imagine the reaction that you had stubbing your toe, because your battery is low, your resiliency, your emotional capacity, your mental energy. And then imagine what it would have been in the morning after your exercise when your battery was full. Your reaction is going to be different. And so think about how your battery is doing compared to your entire family. Everyone's battery is low. Everyone's light bulb is shining a little less. How emotional is everyone in the house when it's dinner time, when it's actually family time to make meaningful connections with your family? So your amygdala is overactive all day long against all these stressors. Disable your higher cortex for these moments, and it drains your overall battery all day long. So when you have low emotion, and you're calm and you're relaxed, your amygdala is less active and your higher cortex is able to execute. And then when you disable your higher cortex with that overactive high emotion, anger, fear, excitement, even love or happiness can kind of hijack that higher cortex. So one thing to note, that interferences may be the same, but if you have an active state of calm and work on overall stress reduction, your amygdala and limbic system will not have that reactivity to those same stimuli. So a person who is stressed will react to being cut off in traffic very differently than a calm individual. So we can work on this overactive amygdala with meditation, cardiac coherence. So what we need to do is work on increasing our battery charge and decreasing the interferences of our overactive amygdala. So let's now transition on what are those concrete things you can do from all the things that we've talked about, starting with this little equation of performance, which is your potential, which we want to increase, and your interferences that we want to decrease. So what we need to work on is hacking your brain, not letting it be hijacked. So we want to hack our brain, if you will, and take control. We need to charge our batteries and take control of that limbic system. Sleeping, exercise, and eating well, working on our stress reduction. These are kind of the key lifestyle things that help not only peak brain performance, but nearly any disease that we can have, from cancer and heart disease, stroke, neurodegenerative disorders. Anything that we have is always impacted when we don't sleep well, when we're not exercising, when we're not eating healthy, clean, and we're not working on our stress reduction on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis. And so things like cardiac coherence, and I want to divert just for a second on cardiac coherence. Cardiac coherence is a specific practice where we can actually change how our sympathetic, which is our fight and flight system, and our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest system, interplay with each other. So we always have to have a balance. And we live in a world where most individuals are sympathetically dominant. They're in that fight and flight mode more than they are in that rest and digest mode. And so they live in this disequilibrium, and cardiac coherence is specifically designed to work on bringing balance into that system, so that when you practice it, you're bringing it, but then you're maintaining it, so that you're not having this reactivity that's fear-based, that's based on our amygdala. So cardiac coherence is something that I think that everyone should always be practicing all day long in small little moments, where they're doing in day-to-day, when they're calm, when they're not calm, remembering that cardiac coherence. And then meditation. And then there's other wellness activities like the salt room and biomat and infrared sauna. All of these have been designed and have been picked specifically so that they can bring balance into our sympathetic, parasympathetic system, into our adrenal glands and high cortisol system, which all impact our ability to react. And then neurofeedback with alpha training and really working on the balance of our brain frequencies so that we're not reacting and that we can truly focus and attend. And then don't forget those kind of essential vitamins that help with our brain function, that really help with that charge. Think about juice and that electrical charge that we're trying to give our brain. And that's going to be with B vitamins and omega-3 fatty acids and magnesium. And so then let's think about those decreasing those interferences, that bottom-up attention. So put that do not disturb on your phone and your computer. Try it for an hour a day when you're working on a project or you just want to get dinner done. Just put your phone on do not disturb, your computer on do not disturb. There are notification settings where you can do that. Turn off automatic notifications on all those different apps so that your phone isn't constantly dinging with news and alerts and phone text messages. And turn off the TV in the background. So many of us have this TV kind of running in the background while we're trying to, hang out with your family and work on a project, do homework. We need to turn off that background TV. These are going to all kind of slowly affect that connection, remembering that connection being dampened. And then stop multitasking. So when that ding actually happens, instead of ignoring it, don't actually answer it. If you keep on switching back and forth between different aspects of your day and different notifications, you're going to constantly be turning off connections and rebuilding new ones, and you're really not going to be efficient. And so you want to turn off your watch. Now we have these iPhone watches. Those are not doing a lot of service to us, because now the phone isn't just put away. Now we're getting just the vibration, and you're looking down and you're deciding, am I going to answer that phone call? Am I going to answer that text? Do I need to go find my phone? And now you've just interrupted whatever you were doing, whatever conversation you were having with a friend or colleague, or even your boss. And I just want to say, be present with whomever you're with, whether it's your family, your friends, or your coworkers. Really try to stop that multitasking, because it's not efficient or productive, and is really not meaningful in the connections that you're trying to make socially. So those are the things that I hope that you can do to help you with that peak brain performance, so that you can live more optimally. And maybe these small little things that you can make and changes you can make in your day-to-day. So take that list that you are keeping track of during this talk. In this 35 minutes that we've been talking, how many texts and notifications did you get? How many times did you get distracted or multitask during this talk? It's important to work on self-reflection. Honestly, be honest with yourself and really think about, what are you doing, and how are we distracted in our mind, and especially in this digital world, in this 21st century. So I empower you to take control of your brain and hack your brain, and give yourself some more moments of peak performance and meaningful connections and meaningful productivity. So thank you for joining us today. If you would like to refer to Palm Health for any additional resources, and our YouTube channel for additional talks by our experts in health and wellness.